Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Jess, and I'm going to be the host for today. And with us, we have Alex Leitch with Subversive Games. And just tell me a little bit about yourself and your company and why you decided to come to GaymerX East.
So my name is Alex, and I'm here with Artifact Digital, which is my small agency and consultancy. And what we do is we build interactives in unexpected places, and we build games that are perhaps outside of the normal realm of AAA. So I'm pretty deeply embedded in the Toronto indie gaming community, which sets its standards, actually unbelievably high for participation and for inclusion and for weird things. So I really look up to the people who I know in that community, and my company tries very hard to bring new works that take old ideas and old mechanics and put something new into them that are maybe not what you would find in the mainstream.
Right, okay. What is an example of like an old mechanic that comes and gets reinvented like that?
So what I'm working on these days is I am working on a roguelike as part of a residency for the Hand-Eye Society in Toronto. It's called Paris Night Train, and it is about a train from Berlin to Paris that has been canceled. Like, you can't ride this train anymore. But it's about the experience of traveling to try and escape from who you have been. And this is, I think, a fairly common experience with people who come to New York City or who backpack through Europe. There's this expectation that you'll become a new person through the process of this cosmopolitan travel. And so as you wake up on the train, your character has to avoid the characters who remind them of who they've been. So like if you run into too many Canadians smoking pot or Australians having parties or hen parties or stag parties, you slowly decay and you end up like dead in a suburb. But you're alive, you just go back to your hometown and you don't get to escape who you were.
And you haven't grown as a person.
But of course, if you stay asleep and you make it to Paris, like, this is a canceled train, it's not going anywhere.
Oh my goodness.
It's not going anywhere. Like, you can't escape who you are just by doing this thing. You have to actually pay attention to the world around you, I think, is the point of the game.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm doing it as a roguelike is something that I've discovered is I got a lot better and more patient with procedural generation and math as I moved up in the gaming scene, as I kept working harder and longer at, like, teaching. And so I'm really interested in procedural narratives.
That's fantastic. So I know that math is sometimes a very sore subject for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you just said that you've gotten very comfortable with that. How would you explain that sort of journey? How did that happen for you?
Well, when I was a child, math was very difficult for me. Like, pursuing the math end of programming was really difficult because math makes heavy use of symbolic language, and symbolic language is a type of jargon that's really specifically designed to let you think about big ideas in small ways so that you can write bigger and bigger facts, basically. But it means that higher maths are very hard for people to get into, and it's easy to tell people that they're bad at math and that they will never get good at it. But a lot of math is just building patterns, and if you are a person who is gifted with the magic of loving things in straight lines and orderly boxes, that means that if that starts to mature in you, you have a real opportunity to chase down that repetition of things, and you can take it in promising directions. So what that means is that, like, you were bad at math when you were 12 because you couldn't concentrate, but as you get older and you get the ability to concentrate, or you learn how you can control your ability to concentrate, you have the chance to get better at it and change yourself into a person who can do those things. And that's what programming, especially as a discipline and as a form of poetry, has meant to me as I've gotten older.
That's fantastic. That makes me really excited to get back into math. So going back a little bit, so you do game development and the programming aspect, but you were also talking about like how you work at an agency and also with the independent gaming community within Toronto.
Yeah.
So how exactly do all of those connect?
All right. So I am a full-time software developer.
Okay.
That's what I do for money. And my agency also works for money, but we don't work for consistent money. We work for the money that looks nice, not the money that pays rent. So I pay rent by developing software for clients through my agency, which is how I got good at math. Is clients really like it when things work and stay working, and you can promise they will. And then the rest of my time is spent with various members of the indie community, and teaching game design at OCAD University in Toronto. Oh. So I teach level 1 game design, which means I have lots of chances to work through how to encourage people to make a game and what makes a good one, and lots of chances to practice marketing and being like, okay, but maybe you need to revisit this mechanic. Critique is fun. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I mean, is that like to be a successful indie, you have to have more than one thing going on at a time, and you have to learn to balance all of those different things. So that's how I run Artifact. Sometimes I hire people to help, particularly with art, particularly with music, because those parts are fun, but they are also the stuff that you can sometimes pay people to do for you.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So going back to like your game design class, what are some key points that you would tell someone who has never really thought about designing a game and might have like a small background in math or art or so? Like, what are the key points of them starting off? Like, how do they stay organized?
Oh, how do they stay organized? That isn't actually a thing I would put into the beginning.
Really?
I leave project management to the very end of my class because I find that just pressuring people to deliver a game, any game inside of 2 weeks, gets me a game a lot faster than telling them about Trello or Asana, both of which I would like to name check. I use Asana usually to build my projects because once you have more than 4 people working on something, deadlines get to be important.
Right.
What I prefer people to use is I like it when my students go to the dollar store or the most cheapest possible place for things, and I make them bring a kit and do a couple of the exercises from Game Challenges for Designers. My favorite one is something that I call Calvin Ball and that some people call Make a Game in 15 Minutes, which is where you take students and you say, hey, here's some paper, go around the circle. Each of you makes a rule. Each of you gets one chance to either make a new rule which reverses the previous rule or not. You get to play the game, keep going. And if they do that 10 to 15 times and make 10 to 15 different games with a group of 5 to 7 people, they'll start to get a sense of how to build a multiplayer game and what a mechanic is in practice.
Right.
And I don't think that people need to necessarily take on single player games before they have a sense of multiplayer, mostly because if you're playing against other people, the AI comes for free.
Right.
And otherwise what you're building is a state machine, and state machines are very complicated to build for one person. Like a thing that says if this then that has a lot of unexpected side effects and can be hard to manage.
Right.
Whereas playing with another person, it's more fun.
Is it more unpredictable because you can't obviously okay.
You can't memorize that. If you like, one of the big risks with AAA games is you put so much money and so much time into sound and into graphics, and that money disappears the moment somebody figures out your underlying core mechanic, because they will then just be rewarded for executing the core mechanic, and everything outside of it will very quickly fade away, which is why games like Katamari, where you only have one mechanic, can sometimes be much, much more successful. Or Mario, there's only one mechanic in Mario, it's jumping. That's it, nothing else matters, which is why the later Marios, I think, are less successful, because their running isn't as good as like the new Legend of Zelda is running. It just feels like glue. So that's what's really important is in your game you might have one good mechanic, and if it's a really good mechanic, people will play your game.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good point. Never really thought of it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I guess I don't really know what to say. It's like I spend a fair amount of time thinking about incentive systems and ways to encourage people in my classes, because I think that in first year, which I am lucky enough to teach, I love teaching first year, everybody is willing to take a chance, and if you don't just step on them directly and say no F's for all, you have a real opportunity to make people understand that what they do in their lives matters, and that one of the reasons I still love games is because they can give you a sense of agency even when very little else can.
Yes, definitely.
And that sort of software development, that sort of work really matters to me, like teaching people that they have a shot. Not like the $1 million I never have to work again shot, but a shot at having a purpose. I think that's a really valuable thing that games can do. And that's why I like subversive games, because they sneakily say, hey, you matter.
Yeah.
Hey, you matter. Hey, your life matters. Hey, what you spend your time doing matters. You can make a difference to your own self and your friends, even if you can't make a difference to anything else. And
fantastic.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really eye-opening. I like that a lot. So is that kind of ideology why you've decided to come to GaymerX East this year?
Yeah, so the indie game scene in Toronto sometimes bubbles up opportunities and just sends them my way and says, hey, this seems like an interesting thing. And I, of course, knew about GaymerX before, and I hadn't thought about it as a place I would go, but a couple of my friends said, hey, let's go to this thing. And I was like, hey, I think that we should go to this thing. Let's go do it. And so I came here because my sometime collaborator, Ifat Sheikh, said, who will be on later today, said, hey, it's time to go to New York and do GaymerX. And I was like, oh, yeah, actually I should definitely exit my hole that I live in and go away and do it. So that's why I've come this year.
Okay, great.
Because normally I would just hide in the academic conference section talking about Conway's Law.
Conway's Law?
It's the rule that software gets to be as complicated as the number of people who are engaging in it. It's the reason why big software teams can be more expensive and more difficult to manage than 2 people and less productive.
So too many cooks in the kitchen, but that's a good thing?
It's more that every piece of what somebody writes will always inherently reflect both them and their communication strategy. It's a weird edge case in network theory.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the most fun thing to talk about on a Twitch stream.
Well, I love it. That's why I'm asking about it.
But yeah, that is one of the things I talk about and my research is on communication theory and on how software design reflects what people are thinking and how people think about language. And Conway's Law is the law that if you have a compiler written by 4 people, what you'll end up is 4 separate segments that read very differently and have very different styles. And there's a lot of tooling around software to make that less challenging.
Okay. That is really wonderful. I appreciate you taking a few minutes of your time today to chat with us. Is there anything that, like, one sentence that you really wanted to shout out to the Twitch universe or anything?
Keep being a great community, Twitch. I love your moderation tools. I think they're magic. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.